With an IQ of 152, you could be running companies, not teaching children their ABCs. I'd heard variations of this statement from my father throughout my life, but this time was different. This time, Harrison Bennett wasn't just expressing disappointment in his daughter's career choice. He was cutting me off completely. I'm Alexandra Bennett, Alex to my friends, and at 28, I'd finally done the unthinkable. I'd accepted a position as a high school teacher instead of joining Bennett Technologies, my family's thriving tech company. The mahogany-paneled walls of my father's home office seemed to close in as he paced behind his desk, his custom Italian loafers wearing a path in the Persian carpet. My mother, Catherine, sat perfectly poised in her designer armchair, her expression a carefully crafted mask of concern. "Alexandra, darling," she said, her voice dripping with practiced patience. "You have to understand how this looks. We've invested everything in your education. The best private schools, Harvard Business School, leadership training, and now you want to throw it all away to teach teenagers." I straightened my spine, feeling the weight of my teaching credentials in my bag. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm using my education exactly how I want to use it. "How you want?" Dad's voice rose as he spun to face me. "What about what this family needs? The company needs. Your brother James is handling the technical side, but we need you for operations and strategy." It was all planned out. Ah, yes, the plan. The grand Bennett dynasty blueprint that had been laid out since before I was born. James would handle the engineering and product development, following in Dad's footsteps, while I would manage operations and eventually become CEO, inheriting Mom's role. Perfect symmetry, perfect succession. Except I had my own plans. "Dad, I've taught coding workshops for 3 years alongside my MBA. I've seen the impact direct education can have. The excitement when a student finally grasps a concept, the potential unleashed when. Potential?" He slammed his hand on the desk, making the family photos rattle. "You want to talk about potential? Bennett Technologies is about to sign the largest government contract in our history. We're talking billions in educational technology infrastructure. That's real impact." I knew about the contract. The A-Tech initiative, a massive project to modernize the entire state's educational technology infrastructure. Bennett Technologies was the frontrunner, but they still needed approval from the State Department of Education. And who do you think evaluates and implements these education contracts? I asked quietly. Teachers, education professionals, people who understand both technology and classroom realities. "Don't get smart with me," Dad snapped. "If you want to understand how technology works in education, you do it from the corporate side, not by grading papers and chaperoning proms." Mom stood up, smoothing her silk blouse. "Alexandra, we're just trying to protect you. Teaching is admirable, but the salary, the status," she shuddered delicately. "How will you maintain your lifestyle?" I looked around the office, at the symbols of wealth that had defined my upbringing. The rare art pieces, the antique furniture, the photos of our family at charity galas and yacht club events. Maybe I don't want that lifestyle. The words hung in the air like a death knell. Dad's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Then you won't have it. As of this moment, you're cut off. No more trust fund, no more allowance, no more family connections. If you want to live like a teacher, you'll do it without our support." "Harrison," Mom gasped, though I noticed she made no move to contradict him. "You have a choice, Alexandra," Dad continued, his voice cold. Take your rightful place at Bennett Technologies, or face the consequences of your idealism. I stood up, surprising myself with how steady my legs felt. I've already made my choice. I start at Franklin High School next month. Then I suggest you start learning to live on a teacher's salary immediately. He turned his back to me. A clear dismissal. Madeline will show you out. Mom gave me one last pleading look but remained silent as I walked out of the office. The housekeeper, Madeline, was waiting in the hallway, my coat already in her hands. She'd worked for our family for 20 years, had practically raised me while my parents built their empire. "Miss Alexandra," she whispered, slipping something into my pocket as she helped me with my coat. "You'll always have friends here." Outside, the autumn air was crisp as I walked to my car, a modest Prius I'd bought myself, much to my parents' horror. Inside my pocket, I found a folded envelope containing $2,000 in cash and a note in Madeline's careful handwriting. "For emergencies. Proud of you." I drove home to my new apartment, also modest, also self-funded, fighting back tears. Not of sadness, but of determination. My parents thought teaching was beneath me, a waste of potential. They had no idea that I was about to have more influence over their precious contract than they could imagine. Because what my family didn't know was that I hadn't just accepted any teaching position. Through my work with coding workshops and educational outreach, I had caught the attention of some very important people in the state's education department. People who were looking for someone with both educational experience and a deep understanding of technology infrastructure. My position at Franklin High was only part of my new role. The other part, the part I couldn't tell my parents about due to confidentiality agreements, was as special advisory chair to the State Education Technology Implementation Committee. In other words, I would be one of the key people evaluating and approving that billion-dollar contract my father was so excited about. But that would be a lesson for another day. Right now, I had curriculum planning to do and a classroom to prepare. After all, as any good teacher knows, the best revelations come after proper preparation. I pulled into my apartment complex, passing the gleaming high-rises where I used to live to reach my more humble building. A text from James lit up my phone. "They'll come around, Lex. They always do." I smiled sadly. My brother meant well, but he didn't understand. This wasn't about them coming around. It was about standing my ground, about proving that success isn't measured by the size of your office or the number of zeros in your bank account. Sometimes the most important lessons are the ones that hurt the most to teach, and I was about to give my parents an education they'd never forget. The first month of teaching at Franklin High School taught me more about leadership than any Harvard Business School course ever did. Standing in front of 30 teenagers, trying to make computer science both accessible and engaging, required skills that couldn't be learned from textbooks or board meetings. Miss Bennett, Maria Rodriguez, one of my brightest students, raised her hand during our coding workshop. Why do schools always get stuck with outdated technology? My cousin's private school has all the latest equipment, but here we're working with computers older than we are. The question hit close to home. The very contract my father was pursuing was meant to address this disparity, but I knew Bennett Technologies' proposal focused more on profit margins than educational equity. That's actually a complex issue, I began, seeing an opportunity for a real-world lesson. Who here knows anything about educational technology procurement? Blank faces stared back at me. Okay, let's break it down. When schools need technology, they have to go through a whole process. I started sketching on the whiteboard, creating a flowchart of the procurement process. By the end of class, My students understood more about educational infrastructure than most corporate executives I knew. After school, I headed to my other office, a sleek space in the State Education Department building downtown. As Special Advisory Chair, I had the responsibility of reviewing all major technology implementation proposals for the state's schools. "Alex, you need to see this," Sarah Martinez, my deputy, said it as I walked in. She handed me a thick folder with the Bennett Technologies logo emblazoned on it. Their final proposal just came in. I spent the next 3 hours reviewing the document, my heart sinking with each page. The technology was cutting edge, yes, but the implementation plan was clearly designed to maximize profit rather than educational impact. Schools would be locked into expensive service contracts, forced to upgrade on the company's schedule rather than their own, and smaller districts would receive lower priority support. "They don't understand how schools actually work," I muttered, making notes in the margins. This would bankrupt half our districts within 5 years. "Speaking of not understanding," Sarah said, handing me a newspaper. "You might want to see this." It was the business section of the city paper. There, smiling from a photo, were my parents at a charity gala. The headline read, "Bennett Technologies set to revolutionize state education." The article quoted my father, "Our company understands education better than anyone. This contract will transform how our children learn." I was still staring at the article when my phone buzzed. A text from my brother James. "Dad's planning a big announcement dinner next week. They're so confident about the contract. They're already celebrating. Maybe you should come? Try to patch things up." Before I could respond, another message came through, this one from the family group chat I was still part of, though no one had addressed me directly in weeks. "Mom's celebration dinner next Thursday at Le Cirque. Black tie. Harrison has a major announcement. Dad, time to show everyone what the Bennett family can achieve in education. Would be nice if ALL family members could demonstrate such commitment to educational excellence." The passive-aggressive dig wasn't subtle. I switched back to James's private message. "They're inviting the whole board, major shareholders, even the press. Dad's convinced the contract is a done deal. Says their inside sources at the education department confirmed it's just a formality at this point." I felt a chill. Inside sources? I knew there had been rumors of Bennett Technologies trying to influence department officials. This would need investigation. The next week was a blur of activity. By day, I taught my students, working with outdated equipment, but seeing their enthusiasm for learning shine through regardless. By night, I pored over contract proposals, meeting with other committee members, and building a case for what our schools really needed. I also did something I'd never done before. I started documenting every interaction, every email, every piece of evidence suggesting Bennett Technologies was trying to manipulate the contract process. If they were playing dirty, they needed to be exposed. 2 days before the celebration dinner, I received an official invitation. Not from my parents, but from Bennett Technologies' PR department. "You are cordially invited to celebrate Bennett Technologies' groundbreaking achievement in educational technology. As a professional educator, your presence would add valuable perspective to this historic moment." They didn't even realize who I was. To them, I was just another teacher to be used as a prop in their corporate theater. I RSVP'd yes. That same afternoon, I finished my final review of their proposal. The verdict was clear. While their technology was impressive, their implementation plan would be disastrous for our schools. The contract couldn't be approved as written. I also finished compiling my evidence of their attempted contract manipulation. The file was damning. emails showing improper contact with department officials, evidence of attempted bribes, documentation of false claims in their proposal. As I prepared for the celebration dinner, I thought about Maria's question about outdated computers, about all the students in underfunded schools who deserved better, about the difference between looking successful and actually making a difference. My parents thought they were about to teach me a lesson about success. Instead, they were about to learn one about integrity. I slipped my presentation materials and documentation into my bag, along with my Department of Education credentials. Tomorrow night, at their own celebration dinner, they would finally understand exactly what just a teacher could do. The stage was set for a lesson they'd never forget. And this time, I would be the one doing the teaching. Lee Sirk's private dining room sparkled with crystal and success. The city's business elite mingled over champagne, celebrating a victory not yet officially won. My father stood at the center of it all, holding court like a king in his empire. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple black dress that would have made my mother wince if she recognized me at all. For the first 20 minutes, I moved through the crowd unnoticed, just another teacher invited for show. Ladies and gentlemen, my father's voice boomed across the room. Thank you all for coming tonight. We're here to celebrate not just a contract, but a vision. Bennett Technologies is about to revolutionize education across our state. Applause rippled through the room. I watched my mother beam with pride. My brother James shift uncomfortably. He'd always been more honest than our parents. And the board members nod in self-satisfaction. In just a few days, Dad continued, we'll be signing the largest educational technology contract in state history. Our inside sources tell us it's a done deal. More applause. And to demonstrate our commitment to educators, we've invited several teachers to join us tonight. These are the people who will be using our technology, shaping young minds. His voice trailed off as he finally spotted me in the crowd. The color drained from his face. Alexandra? Hello, Dad, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Don't let me interrupt. You were saying something about inside sources and done deals. Mom's champagne glass nearly slipped from her fingers. James took a step forward, then thought better of it. What are you doing here? Dad's attempt at a smile looked more like a grimace. I was invited. I held up the PR department's invitation. As a professional educator, though I'm actually here in my other capacity, I reached into my bag and pulled out my credentials. As Special Advisory Chair of the State Education Technology Implementation Committee. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. I could see the wheels turning in every head as they processed what this meant. That's impossible, Mom finally managed. Why? Because I'm just a teacher. I walked to the front of the room, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Actually, that's exactly why I was chosen for the role. They needed someone who understood both technology and education. Someone who could evaluate proposals based on real classroom needs, not just profit margins. Dad's face had moved from white to red. Now see here. No, Dad. You see here. I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the room's display system. Let me share some findings from our proposal review. The next 10 minutes were brutal. I methodically took apart Bennett Technologies' implementation plan, showing how it would devastate school budgets, highlighting the predatory service contracts, demonstrating the impact on smaller districts. And then there's the matter of these emails. New documents filled the screen. Communications between Bennett Technologies and department officials. Attempted bribes. False claims in official submissions. Would anyone like to explain these? The board members were now staring at my father with horror. Corporate lawyers in the crowd were already reaching for their phones. "You can't do this," Dad spluttered. "We're your family." "Yes, we are." Which makes this even more disappointing. I turned to address the whole room. The contract proposal, as written, has been rejected. However, the committee has prepared a conditional approval framework that got everyone's attention. Bennett Technologies can resubmit a revised proposal that meets the following criteria: fair pricing structures for all districts, flexible implementation timelines, reduced service contract terms, and most importantly, a requirement that 30% of the contract value be reinvested in teacher training and support programs. That would cut our profit margins in half. Someone from the financial department protested. Yes, I agreed. It would bring them in line with ethical business practices for educational contracts. You have 48 hours to decide if you want to resubmit under these terms, or we move to the next qualified bidder. The room erupted in chaos. Board members huddled in corners. Lawyers whispered urgently to executives. And my parents just stared at me like they'd never seen me before. All this time, Mom said softly, "You were doing exactly what you taught me," I finished for her. "Making an impact on education, just not the way you planned." James approached, a hint of a smile on his face. "You know what this means. If we accept these terms, you'll be overseeing our company's largest contract." "No," I corrected him. "I'll be ensuring that students like Maria Rodriguez get the educational tools they deserve, regardless of which company provides them." The next few weeks were intense. Bennett Technologies ultimately accepted the committee's terms. They really didn't have a choice once their ethical violations came to light. The revised contract was actually better for everyone. Schools got fair terms, teachers got support, and the company maintained its market position, just with more reasonable profits. My parents? That took longer to resolve. Dad showed up at Franklin High 3 weeks after the dinner. I was teaching my coding class when he appeared in the doorway. "Miss Bennett," Maria called out, "isn't that your dad? The tech company guy?" "Yes," I said, watching him take in the classroom, the engaged students, the work we were doing with limited resources. "He's here to learn." "Alexandra," he said when class ended. I was wrong. About teaching. About you. About a lot of things." "I know," I replied. "That's why I had to teach you differently." We didn't hug it out. Things weren't that simple. But over time, something interesting happened. My father started showing up at school board meetings. My mother began advocating for educational causes. They didn't fully understand my choices, but they started respecting them. The trust fund remained cut off, but I didn't care. My teacher's salary, supplemented by my department role, was enough. I had something better than wealth. I had purpose. A year later, I received a letter from Maria Rodriguez. She'd been accepted to MIT on a full scholarship. Her application bolstered by the coding projects she'd completed in my class, using the new technology her school could finally afford. I pinned her acceptance letter next to my Harvard Business School diploma, 2 different kinds of success, both equally valuable. Sometimes the best lessons are the ones we never planned to teach. My parents thought they were punishing me by cutting me off from their world of wealth and corporate power. Instead, they freed me to build something more meaningful, a bridge between that world and the one where real education happens, one student at a time. As for being just a teacher, well, sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one making the loudest noise. Sometimes it's the one with the red pen, the lesson plan, and the ability to make a real difference. Just ask my parents. They learned that lesson the hard way. But then again, those are always the lessons we remember best.